business, broad and narrow, I suppose. We've done quite a lot of work over the last few years, working mainly in the power, mining, and oil and gas sectors. But what I'm going to present today is a paper that a colleague of mine and I wrote, which is basically a step-by-step guide for business on how they can embed adaptation within their activities. So just as an overview, we've had discussion this morning about the kind of systemic risks in relation to climate change. And I'll give some examples, specific examples related to some case studies, and then go through each of the 4 steps of developing an adaptation strategy and managing risk, and then a couple of conclusions at the end. So this is from the World Economic Forum, and it's basically global risks. And what we can see is that climate change comes up. That's rising greenhouse gas emissions, water supply crisis, failure of climate change adaptation, food shortage crisis, persistent extreme weather. And these are some of the top risks, most costly risks, and they're all related to climate change and will be exacerbated by climate change. I can't speak, sorry, late in the day. What we see here is this is failure of climate change adaptation, which is only one of those risks, and how interconnected it is with economic, environmental, geopolitical, societal, and technological risks linked to many of those other areas. And we all know, and we're all trying to grapple with how to deal with these issues from a kind of governance and institutional perspective. And it's also important for business to understand how it impacts their day-to-day operations, their supply chains, their ability to be sustainable in terms of keeping operating going into the future. So this is it's a general example of risks for a mining complex. So you have where's the flashing light? I don't know. Your basic risk sources at the top, so your rising temperatures, your increasing frequency, intensity of storms, droughts, sea level rise, etc. And each one of those links to a wide variety of different climate events which might have an impact on the activities of the business. And when you look at the layer at the bottom, sorry, I don't know how easy it is for you to read all of that, but I'll explain it a bit more just now. Your business system components. So you're looking at how do all of these things impact your mine infrastructure or your tailings facilities, your transport network, your water supply. And each one of those things has numerous different consequences to the business. So it can be looking at cost, infrastructure integrity, environment, reputation, social communities. That can all be as a result of one impact. So for example, a mine in Peru, it's up in the Andes in Peru, and it obtains water from a desalination plant on the coast. And that water is piped 2,500 meters up the mountain to reach the mine. Now the problem is that it's a very mountainous, very landslide prone. They have very heavy rainfall during El Niño periods, and so the risk of that pipeline breaking is fairly high. In a hypothetical situation in the future, if that pipeline breaks, they still need to get water. So they obtain a temporary abstraction license from the local municipality to take groundwater from near the region of the mine. But the problem is that then reduces the water available for a local community which is already experiencing water supply issues because of drought. That has reputational impacts on the mine. It has impacts on agriculture, kind of social cohesion and everything in the area. So one simple decision by the mining company can have a massive impact on not only the local communities, but the mine's reputation and their ability, their license to operate, as it were, going forward. So what we're trying to do here is help companies understand this massive web of impacts, and within their existing processes, because nobody's got time to do anything new, try and help them manage these and to be a bit more strategic in their planning to help reduce the risks going forward. So this is our 4-step process, starting with step 1, which is understanding the climate context. Now, we've been talking a lot about projections, but we find that the easiest way to get people to understand what climate change might mean to them is to remind them what's happened in the past. So a lot of our work is going in and talking to the engineers, the disaster risk managers, the environmental people, the water specialists, everybody at the mine who has either been there for a long time or has some links to some sort of climate variable. And basically, we talk to them and analyze historic weather data to understand what events have happened in the past and how has that impacted the mine. And the paper we've put together provides guidance on how people can do that themselves without external support. But the idea is to say, okay, so in 2010, there was an overflow of the inside ash system, which led to complete shutdown of the plant for 2 weeks, which had knock-on implications to another plant which you supply. How much did that cost? 200 million rand for a 2-week shutdown. That happened again in 2012. So we were on site, and okay, I'm not an engineer, but it looked to me like if they just dug that drainage channel a little bit deeper, that might stop that flooding, which could save them 400 million rand. And that drainage channel could potentially cost 20 million rand, so it seems like an absolute no-brainer. But the process that I'm going to explain now will help illustrate what I mean and the decision-making process that we go through. But the key thing is for the engineers and the designers of either new facilities or rehabilitating and putting in new kits is to understand how the baseline is going to change. So they've been managing flood events and rainfall for years in the past, but what is often surprising to them is actually how this might change. So this is taking data from, I think it's from the CSAG portal, showing how the blue line on this one is the baseline rainfall from 1980 to 1999 and then projected up to 2040, and showing how the seasonal rainfall changes. Now, on a mine in the Northern Cape that's got a very tight water balance, that's going to be very important for making sure that they have enough water to continue their operations, so long as they understand that. The one on the other side is showing how many days where the temperature is above 30, 35, and 40 degrees. And where, again, in the Northern Cape, it's incredibly hot already, there are some policies in place where work has to stop when it gets above 40 or 45 degrees. So if you have an increase in the number of hot days, you get a reduction in production, and so therefore that is a cost to your business. So it's important to understand what these implications are so that they can start managing it going forward. So step 2 is analyze impacts and risk scenarios. And so the idea here is to go through a number of processes. One of them is risk mapping. I gave an example earlier of the web of risks linked to the pipeline in South America. And this here is, again, for a mining complex, looking at flooding. And you've got flooding can cause soil erosion, landslides, short bursts of heavy rainfall, reduced absorption of groundwater. It can result in human adaptation, movement of the local communities, etc., etc. And all of these then have knock-on implications for the facility itself. And so the idea is to do a kind of workshop brainstorming session to come up with all of the possible risks on site so that you can put those into and start working those through the company's risk management process, which has got its very specific scoring process and is something that the people on site know and understand. And so the idea is to do some background work to get it to a point where they know what to do with it going forward. So here is your traditional risk management approach. Basically, understanding future climate risk is you take your existing risk times the projections equals your future risk. I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail, but it's looking at likelihood and consequence and the value at stake, because the most important thing for business is how much is this going to cost. It's the only way that you're going to get people to really pay attention to it. So future risk then is that's where you apply your climate change projections to understand how your baseline is going to change. Now, a key thing is that your traditional risk management approach is fine, but there's so many more ways of looking at it that allow you to fully understand and appreciate this full web of risks. So a key thing is climate change will amplify existing risks. So you may have already captured flooding, heavy rainfall in a risk register, but understanding how climate change might make that worse in the future is important to understand. Then stress testing and scenario planning is also very important, particularly for engineers who say, okay, that's fine, so in 2050, how many more millimeters of rain are we going to get? And we're like, we can't say that. So what we try to do is build in kind of what-if analysis of high, medium, and low future scenarios, which are linked to climate change projections, but are also linked to business development and potential impacts. So, for example, a power station in Taiwan has the facility itself, which is based on the coast. Coal storage is covered by, they've got these domes on them because they get hit by typhoons all the time. So it's well protected, and then they've got a fairly long transmission line. Now, the low scenario is the climate basically stays the same. 2 minutes. Oh, okay, I'm going to have to hurry. Okay, anyway, maybe I won't go into that in a lot of detail, and if anyone wants to find out, you can come speak to me afterwards. But basically, you have your best, medium, and worst case scenarios, and then you apply your adaptation measures to those, which allows you to see not necessarily what is going to happen, but it definitely aids decision making, because it allows you to test how far you're willing to go and how much it might cost. So step 3 is developing the business case for adaptation. And this is where you really need to get into the details of the costs. So your investigation of how much these impacts have cost in the past and how much particular adaptation measures might cost. The key thing is it's intervening in the system and in the web, and there are lots of knock-on implications of what you're doing. So it's important to take an approach which really investigates the web of risk and how your change might impact all of those different risks. Because very confused. Because you have your direct risks that you can see, okay, I build a flood wall and that's going to reduce the risk there, but then there's also these knock-on implications and unavoidable risks, and to what extent do I pay attention to risks? So we are in a tornado belt. A tornado knocked down the factory next door. When is the one going to come and knock me down? Do I need to do something about it? Do I prepare, or do I just wait to get blown down and then rebuild myself afterwards, because that tornado may never hit me, it may hit my other neighbor but not me. So that's the kind of thing that needs to be discussed when putting together options for adaptation measures. And this shows an example. It's 1 minute, okay. Your mitigation marginal abatement cost curves, we've turned that into an adaptation cost curve just to show the cumulative expected averted loss versus the cost of the measure. And then that it feeds into the business planning and decision-making process to see what measures the company might want to put in place. And then the final step, which is creating an adaptation strategy, gathers all of the information from the previous study and looks to ensure, where do we want to be in the future? What issues are facing us now? How do we want what we do to impact the broader business environment? How do we want it to link with something that I'm trying to advise clients to do at the moment is to talk to local government, provincial government, to understand what adaptation is happening within the region so that they can potentially feed into that. So the example in Peru with the desalination plant on the coast, in the coastal area, there's a very significant water shortage. But by building that desal plant, it gave the mine water, and it also provided additional water for the local communities, enhanced the reputation of the business, and kind of gives them more leverage going forward. Okay, I'm running out of time. Yeah, okay. I think I've said everything there. Adaptation equals risk management, and it's actually not that hard to try and get businesses to talk about it. And we're really finding increasingly that they are concerned about the cost to their operations going forward. And I think that there's an opportunity for business to feed into the activities of local government in the future. Thanks.